You've got a lot to do. Wouldn't it be nice to have a little less on your mind? Eide Bailly can take the pressure off your day-to-day accounting, taxes, data issues, and other business needs. What inspires you inspires us.
This is the Ebb and Flow podcast with Eide Bailly, where you'll find inspired insights on forward movements in the middle market. Now let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome to Ebb and Flow. I'm your host, Clinton Larson, and today we're going to be continuing our conversation about leadership in the workplace. And joining me to talk about that topic is Dave Stende, the managing partner and CEO of Eide Bailly. Welcome to the podcast, Dave.
Good to be here, Clinton.
So like I said, we've been talking about leadership in the workplace for the last few episodes, and we thought this would be a good topic to bring you on to discuss because for our listeners who don't know, Dave is retiring in May after 9 years as managing partner and CEO of Eide Bailly. The firm has seen tremendous growth and change in those 9 years, and I imagine the last couple of years have been the biggest curveball that you've ever had to experience in your career. So I thought maybe that would be a good place to start our conversation. When you look back on the last 9 years, what are some of the top lessons that you've learned as a leader, and how did those help you through what I'm guessing is one of the most challenging or some of the most challenging years of your career?
Yeah, so I became the CEO 9 years ago. And prior to that, I was the chief operating officer for 7 years. So I've been involved in firm management for a good long time. So when I became the CEO, I really was mentored well by my predecessor, Jerry Topp. And I thought, well, this will be a piece of cake. And I know everything there is to know. This will be easy. One thing I've learned is the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And I can look back on the 9 years and realize at the beginning, probably I was a little naive about a few things. And I learned, and the more I learned, the more I realized, man, there's a lot I don't know. And, I think in a way that probably helps because it certainly grounds you, and it probably opens your mind to really hearing the opinions of others because you don't know all the answers, and you need to build a good team, and you need to rely on their input and trust their decision making in the process too. So I think that certainly helped in my transition over the last 9 years in this CEO role.
So related to what you just said about, what you don't know and building a team that can help you fill in those gaps, I imagine, going through a pandemic is something that nobody knew how to do when we started. So maybe can you walk us through some of that experience? Like, what was that like trying to, try to lead a firm in what is just, unprecedented is just been overused with this. But I mean, it really was. I mean, this is something that none of us had ever experienced before. So what was it like to try to lead a firm through something like that?
It was an incredible time. And I like to joke, hey, our firm's 105 years old, so this isn't our first pandemic. We had the Spanish flu in 1919, but
Good point.
We couldn't find the playbook. So we kind of had to make it up as we went. The lessons that I took away from that was, there was this deep concern and uncertainty and worried about not only your health, but your financial security and what was going to happen, this big unknown. And, I think it really enhanced the communication aspect, just communicating to our people, communicating to our partners, communicating with our management team, and trying to work our way through it. And communication with, I tried to put a little optimism in there, but also reality in there, and not hiding the concerns that lay in front of us. And you think of, hey, we might have to do some cuts here, and being honest with our people with the information that we had at the time, because as we went through this, the information changed constantly. Right. And probably that was another aspect is you make decisions based on the best information at the time. You've got to be decisive. You've got to make decisions quickly, but you also can't be stuck with those decisions, and you have to adapt as the information keeps changing. And it kept changing on a daily and weekly basis in the early times of the pandemic. So overall, it was a good experience. I think I feel good about the experience, and I think it taught me some leadership skills. And on top of the pandemic, shortly thereafter, we had the whole racial issues that came to forefront with George Floyd, and that just compounded it. And I think that also helped. I like where we've went over the last 2 years from a diversity and inclusion standpoint. So you take those two events together, and they were, the most challenging events that I certainly had in my 9 years as a CEO. Normally when you step into the role, you expect, hey, there will be a recession at some point. Well, this was completely different and off the charts.
Yeah, and you brought up a few things that I've heard other people talking about when they talk about leadership right now. This the adaptability, having to just be comfortable with change, the transparency that we've sort of been expecting now of the companies we work for, the leaders that we work with, and also, as you mentioned, just like this sort of cultural shift in terms of like talking about things in the workplace that we've never talked before, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. So all of this is obviously a lot of change management. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the fundamentals that you lean on when you have to lead through change? What are some of the things that you make sure are or have been a bedrock for you as you've led through change throughout your career?
I look at that. There's that bell-shaped curve of people's adaptability to change. And so you have to realize you've got a segment, you've got a third that absolutely don't want to do it, and a third that would think, hey, we're changing too slow. And it's really that big middle group that you've got to explain the whys. And when we talk about change, I think it's a certain amount of courage it takes from a leadership perspective, as far as sticking to your guns and pushing that change along, knowing that there will be a lot of detractors along the way. But you've got to accumulate the information, make the best decisions possible. Again, I go back to, I think one of the keys of good leadership is being decisive, but willing to adapt along the way. And with change, I think it also takes a lot of communication. The old adage, people have to hear it 10 times. You also have to be pushing on what's in it for them. Why is this change good for them in the long term, even though there might be some short-term pains associated with it? So probably communication is the whole key to that, and perseverance.
Those are all great skills that I feel like we look to in our leaders, and that kind of brings me back to like what you were talking about when you said when you started this, you all of a sudden realized there was all these things you didn't know that you had to learn. Then I'm curious, in terms of like yourself, like learning about yourself and learning, what you needed to develop, and sort of getting to these skills of being decisive but able to adapt. What are some of the things you've learned being a leader in the workplace that about yourself that maybe you didn't anticipate?
The whole thing is a big, long journey, because my first, I'd say, leadership role was audit department head. And man, that was probably like 27 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, I look back now, I wasn't leading the department, I was managing the department. And just, from an earlier age, just learning the difference between leadership and management. And it's the evolution of leading is much more focused on not managing the people, but leading the people, empowering people, and giving them responsibility and nurturing them and mentoring them along the way. That's a big part of the leadership aspect. And probably the other aspect is really looking forward more than looking back. When you're managing by what are the numbers we had, what's on the schedule, that sort of thing. And, from a leadership standpoint, and I think that's where the skills get enhanced the more you do it, is what's the vision look like 5 years from now, and how are we going to get there, and the steps that we need to take to get to where we want to be. And so it's enhancing those skills about the people development side and also that whole visioning side and strategy.
I think that's a great analogy, that management tends to be focused on what came before, and that, leadership is more about looking ahead. So in terms of looking ahead and trying to, hone that vision, what are some of the skill sets that a good leader needs in order to be able to do that effectively? Obviously, like nobody has a crystal ball, right? So what are some of the things that leaders can do to help, look ahead in a way that's meaningful and takes into account the goals that they have today, and like you said, the adaptability that they need to maybe succeed in those goals?
One skill I think is extremely important is just this natural curiosity. And with that natural curiosity and the desire to keep learning. And as you look ahead, it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of listening to podcasts, it's however you choose to learn, just to get the various perspectives of different experts in the field, and then having those conversations with, locally with your management team and talking through it, and, what are the unintended consequences and obstacles. And it's just general knowledge of learning, and always being curious about what's going to happen.
When you look back at your tenure here at Eide Bailly, what are some of the things that you saw coming? What are some of maybe the things that you didn't see coming, in terms of like the changes we've had and just in maybe the industry, and also, the accounting industry, but also just like the business world?
Well, when I go back 20 some years ago, I was probably not a big change agent. And one of the things I'm proud of that I saw coming was we bought our first fax machine. And I said, this is stupid. We don't need this. And it turns out 20 years later, we didn't need it. So, I feel good about that aspect.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. The fax machine was something that we turns out we didn't need. But in terms of like, I'm thinking about technology, when the internet started and things like that, what are some of the things that, like I said, when you look back on your tenure here, what are some of the things that you saw sort of things were shifting in a certain direction, or what are some of the things that just totally were you never considered would be part of what you do, 9 years ago?
Looking back over 9 years, in that time frame, you knew technology was going to advance quickly. Looking at Gartner curves of what new technologies are coming, and you're always thinking how to implement those in the practice. The one thing that probably surprised me was I thought in certain aspects we'd be further along now than we currently are. If I go back 5 years ago, mm-hmm. and, the intelligent assistants, let's take like an Alexa, I really thought by this time that would be incorporated in our business, and we'd all be using those on our desk to really make ourselves more efficient. So I'm kind of surprised some of that has been slower. Now, on the flip side, and this is probably driven more by the pandemic, how we do business and the whole virtual world in which we live, whether it's Zoom technologies or just the remote working tools that we have, I didn't see that coming. Mm-hmm. It was there, it was available, but it took a disruption like the pandemic to move that along. So some things I think went quicker than I anticipated, and some things actually a little slower than I would have thought over the last few years.
And if I could put you on the spot a little too, like, if you look ahead now, 5 years, what do you get the sense of what's going to happen with, the accounting industry, maybe specifically, or like I said, or the business world? What are some of the things you think might be, what does accounting look like in 5 years? What does business look like in 5 years?
I do think there will be major strides in the automation of some of the lower level work. We've seen snippets of that. That would be one area over the last 5 years I thought was going to move faster. But at some point in time, I think it's going to be like a hockey stick, and it'll happen very quickly. And, I think that'll have an impact on the accounting profession, but business as a whole, because, and I think the disruptive thing that's going to make it into a hockey stick is it is just so difficult to get people. And we have to automate some of those tasks. And you certainly see that in the fast food restaurant area, for example, where you have to order through the kiosks. It's eliminating some of those more menial tasks that no one really likes to do anyway. And then the challenge is, well, how do you develop people quicker to do the more meaningful tasks that really require the intelligence and some expertise? How do you get those people up to speed? That's where the challenge is. But I look at that as more exciting. I think it will enhance the work experience for a lot of people to get those better experiences earlier on in their careers.
We've just been talking about the future, so I'd like to take you back now. When you look back at when you started with the firm, what was the firm like when you started?
When I started 40 years ago, we had, I think, 4 offices, and we had 100 and some people, compared to now 40 some offices and 2,700 people. It's quite a difference there. But I started as an auditor, and, obviously everything was all paper. We had big audit bags we had to carry. It really helped bulk me up a little bit, made my arms a little longer. And the 2 pieces of technology that I joke about that we had was a 10-key calculator and a mechanical pencil. Those were kind of the 2 innovative things that we had. It wasn't until probably my 4th year with the firm we got our first computer, which was, I don't even know what brand it was. It had the little screen that you could barely see, and you weighed 34 pounds, and it really didn't do much. So it's amazing the transition that I've seen over the 40 years. The one thing that hasn't changed is the culture that we have in the firm. And going back to those 40 years and the people that mentored me, which firm was a lot smaller when they started, it's that same sort of culture that we have about, our people come first, and it's caring for the people and trying to make a family relationship. Even as we've grown, that's one of the things I'd say I'm most proud of, is we've been able to keep that great culture that we have as a firm through all the changes that have taken place, both in terms of the size and just how we operate, with technology and those sort of things.
That's a great point. And it's something that we've talked about in the previous episodes about leadership, is just how important culture is now for the next generation coming up, and for the new people we're going to be adding to the workplace, and also just like in this new era of hybrid workplaces, which is something that's likely not ever going to go away. More people working from home, more remote work happening. In terms of keeping a culture intact when you're leading through change, because like you said, the firm is, it's tremendous growth in 40 years, and even in your tenure as CEO, we're talking doubling the firm, and keeping that culture intact. What are some of the ways that you helped keep that intact? What are some of the tips you would give leaders to make sure that they're creating a culture that people want to be a part of?
Yeah, first, in our culture, I think we certainly talk about the team approach. And what I've always found about our firms is, whether you're a partner with a lot of experience or a new hire, we're all teammates, and we're all on the same team, and we're all approachable. And, our job as partners is how do we help develop and mentor staff along the way and give them a great learning experience, and helping them whether they stay in the firm or go somewhere else. The commitment we have is, we're going to enhance your skill set. And with that, it takes the mentoring, it's this relationship building to help them along the journey. Now, as we go into a hybrid or more remote work environment, there's certainly challenges to that. And I think that's been the struggle I've had over the last couple of years with the pandemic. And now that we've went into the hybrid model, is okay, we don't have to go back to the old way, but we still need that relationship building. And, that's why I'm a fan of the hybrid is don't have to be there 5 days a week, but there has to be some interaction to build those relationships, to have those casual conversations, which turn out to be, in a lot of cases, casual mentoring sessions. Without that relationship, that's difficult. So I know I sound a little old school, but if people could be in the office 3 days a week and really make it intentional when they're there, that we're helping each other along the way and we're working together as a team, I think that goes a long way with the development of the skills of our people, both the personal skills and the technical skills of our people. And really that's what binds that culture together. Culture is about this really enjoying who you're working with. I mean, that's the culture that we want. I enjoy the people I work with. And you've got to have a certain amount of personal relationship to really get that feeling.
That's a great perspective. And I wanted to ask you about the mentorship aspect you just mentioned there too. Mentoring is one of those things that you often hear leaders talk about, the mentors that they had, the chance to, mentor someone else. Can you talk a little bit some of your experiences, either being a mentor or having a mentor that really taught you something, and just like how that helped you build your leadership skills?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about the mentors throughout my career, and they're not the same. They change, and I've reflected back on from when I first started the mentors, and they got me to a certain point, and then there was others that sort of took me under their wing, and that's probably the wrong way to say it, because I could say I've been mentored by people and they didn't know that they were mentoring me. Throughout the journey, there's snippets from a bunch of people, and not just people I work with. I'd say there's a number of clients that I have seen as, whether you call them role models or mentors, that I've learned from them a number of aspects of just business aspects or how they interact with people, and some of the skills that they have that I've tried to emulate along the way. So, and as far as mentoring people, some I say I've done more intentional, and some probably unintentional like that also. But to me, part of mentoring is encouraging and being honest, and when it comes to intentional, it's finding opportunities for those people to help them progress in in their career. I've done that for others, and I know there's a number of people that have done that for me.
Let's go back and talk about some of those client experiences that you mentioned, because I feel like that's, I hear this from, other people in the industry about, that, the relationships people build with clients are often, lifelong in some instances and always memorable. So I'm curious, like, what are some of your favorite client stories or client experiences that you've had through the years?
Well, Clinton, it's been a long time since I worked on clients, but the clients I worked on, I did a lot of governments, I did a lot of utilities, and I did a number of commercial enterprises. And they're different, and you learn differently from all these different clients and leaders of those positions. When you talk about private business, there are some clients that I had that were just true entrepreneurs. One client I was really close with, I think he went broke 3 times, but he always had new ideas, and he built when I was working with him, his large successful business, he sold for a lot of money, and he ended up retiring. But, that would be a client that really taught me about creating this vision and creating the excitement, getting people on board. And you talk about perseverance, man, this guy had the perseverance and the risk-taking aspect, willing to take a risk, not careless by any means, but understanding what the risks are and to succeed and to achieve his vision, here's what he had to do. And I just admire him for what he did and the perseverance that he had throughout his entire career.
What about maybe some of your other memories of, either as your time as managing partner and CEO or else just at Eide Bailly? What are some of your favorite memories through your career?
Well, one of the funniest stories, and this gets back to, this is before we had email, back in the 90s. So we put in a new phone system. And we put in this new phone system in like January, which it's a bad time of the year to be doing something. And this phone system, Clinton, this was the first time we ever had voicemail. So this is something new and exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting to be towards the end of busy season, and we've had trouble with this phone system. And people from the phone company they were there darn near every day, it seemed. And so it's getting towards the end of busy season, and our administrative person, Arlene, who sort of ran the firm, she'd been there forever, and you lived in a little fear of Arlene. She's a nice lady, but you lived in fear anyway. And she came around with their interoffice memos, because it had to be typed, and she would lay it on everyone's desk. And she came into my desk and into my office, and I'm on the phone with the client, and she puts this interoffice memo on my desk, and I'm talking, and I'm reading this, and it says the people from the phone company will be here later this afternoon to blow out the phone lines. So come to the front desk and get a plastic bag to wrap your phone in when they blow out these phone lines. Thinking, I don't have time for this. It's busy season. So I finish my phone call. I have to leave for a meeting. So I just take my phone and I put it in my garbage can. And I walk out, and she's at the front desk, and I say, "Hey, Arlene, I just put my phone in the garbage can. Is that okay?" And as I said that, I realized, hey, today is April 1st. That April Fool's joke on me. So we laughed about that one for quite a few.
That's good.
But over the time, it's the best memories are just the people I've worked with and the friends I've made, and it's been an incredible time. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I know. I would imagine. And when you look towards, what the future brings for you, anything on your list right now that you think you want to tackle right away?
Well, right away, I'm going to the Kentucky Derby that first weekend I'm retired, so I'll try that. And if I don't become a professional horse bettor, I will. I'm just kind of looking forward to taking a summer off, and I'm probably this fall I'll reassess what do I want to do. Like to do something, but something with a little slower pace than what I have been doing.
Sure, that's understandable. So maybe to wrap up, Dave, I was curious, going into a time that maybe is going to be something close to normal again, what advice would you have just for leaders right now in 2022 who are just trying to, enter into not only a new era, but also trying to just, remember what it's like to be normal and remember what it's like to be a leader in the workplace? Like, what advice would you give somebody right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because certainly over the last 2 years, the world has changed, and the world is never going back to what it was. And that said, if I was to look at what are the skills that are important for a leader, I don't know if the skills change. Maybe there's a little different degree of emphasis on a few, but I still think the leader needs to make sure they have honest, transparent conversations and communication. And I would say in this new world, maybe the level of communication just needs to be enhanced. I would also say a leader still needs to have that curiosity and thirst for knowledge because the pace of change just continues to increase so much more quickly, and that curiosity and really soaking up the knowledge of what are the trends and where are we going in the next 5 years from a business aspect. I think that's even more important than it was in a pre-pandemic world. But, those are the attributes that I think have always been there that just probably need to be accelerated a little more in this new world in which we live.
Great advice, great food for thought. Well, thank you very much, Dave, for being on the podcast. This has been a great conversation, and I'm sure I speak for everyone at the firm when I say thank you for your time here as a leader, and I wish you all the best of luck in the future.
Thanks, Clinton. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ebb and Flow podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. At Eide Bailly, what inspires you inspires us. We provide a suite of accounting, advisory, and technology services with your business in mind. Visit our website to access tools and resources tailored for you. eidebailly.com/ebbflow. This podcast is distributed with the understanding that Eide Bailly LLP is not rendering legal, accounting, or other professional advice. Listeners should consult with their business advisors before acting on any of the information or opinions shared. For audience questions and topic ideas, visit eidebailly.com/ebbflow. That's EIDEBAILLY.com/EBFLOW. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune in next time.